I'm watching somebody's heart breaking too, and wondering if somewhere you're crying too.
Alas, we're at the end of our Wendy Darling journey, and I am sad. I don't know about you. I don't know if anybody else actually gets physically sad when they finish a series, but it's like the end of an era. I should have slowed down and savored it. It was just too good. I couldn't stop. I think I read this one in a day. I read C's in about a day and a half, but I read this one in a day for sure, and I should have slowed down, but I couldn't. I was sad when I finished C's, but I knew I still had one more book, which, even though I'd already read it, it's been about 3 years, because this was published in 2017, and it takes me 2 or 3 reads to really start remembering stuff. I remembered generalities about what happened in this book, but I remember being so confused because I missed stuff from the first two, that there was so much that I picked up on that I did not get the first time around. And so I knew there were good things in store, but now it's over. I know I mentioned in the last video about C's that I would love for Colleen Oakes to write some prequels about Hook and Pan and kind of how they came to Neverland, just because I'm selfish and I can't get enough. So Shadow is the culmination of everything that happened in Stars and Seas. Picks up where Seas left off, and Wendy has returned to the Lost Boys, and she has come with a repentant heart in order to steal Pan's pipes and get the Tink on her side so that Tink will teach her the Song of the Shadow, because what Peter had done in preceding the first book was he had wiped out the entire fairy race using what had once been a good entity called the Shadow that would take fairies on when they were ready to essentially die. And he had corrupted it by stealing the song they used to call it and binding the Shadow to himself and then corrupting the Shadow so that he can use it for his own villainous purposes. And so in order to destroy the Shadow, essentially, is she needed to learn how to call the Shadow to herself and away from Peter using the same methods that he did. So she has come back with the aim of stealing the Shadow by getting those 2 items, and she is surprised to learn that Peter has brought the love of her life, Booth, to Neverland. What makes it worse is that he used John to do it. John and Wendy have a very tumultuous relationship, a lot of sibling rivalry, and she, in the first book, did not want to leave Pan Island without him or Neverland without him, but she realized it wasn't going to happen. So she took Michael, and they got rescued by Hook. Then they ended up dropping Michael off with the Indians because the war with Peter was going to begin, and that was the safest place for him. So John was kind of a presence in Seas, but now she is face to face with him again. So if you have seen my earlier reviews of the first 2 books, you know that there's a lot of rivalry between Wendy and John. And when she learns that it was actually John who orchestrated bringing Booth to Neverland, she kind of loses it, which we all kind of want her to lose it on John because he's a jerk. I know Peter is the bad guy, but John is the one you hate because he, it's kind of no wonder that he falls in with Peter because, he does have a lot of vulnerabilities, but he's super selfish and he cannot get over himself enough to see. So she loses it on him, but then she sees marks that Peter has left on him because he has been tortured in her absence. And that kind of begins her road to reparation, where she realizes John needs love and support, and she needs to show that to him and convince him that she's his family and what she does is for his best interest. She's on Pan Island. She has her mission. There's a wrench thrown into the mix because Booth is there, And so now she has to make sure Booth is safe while also achieving her goals, but it's not easy. Tinkerbell is essentially brainwashed into her love for Peter, and she will not hear, even though she knows the truth, like she admits that she knows Peter committed genocide on her people, but she just loves him. And so Wendy is unable to get anything from her, and she does not know how to get the pipes. And Hook is like, well, we're running out of time. I will create a distraction to give you some more time. And so there's a little skirmish with some pirates and the Lost Boys. Lost Boys come back, and as they're celebrating, Oxley brings in a crate. Now the thing is, Peter, in preparation for the big war, has brought more boys to Neverland. So there's not as much food. So they're celebrating, and then this crate comes. And I think it's every month someone from Port Duet sends them this crate kind of as a trade for Peter's protection. And so we're like, oh, this is great. And then Oxley, who's one of the generals and who has brought the crate in, realizes this is the second crate they've gotten that month, and something's wrong. So as he has brought out this lovely wrapped gift, he realizes all is not right, and then the gift goes off as a bomb, which that is one of those things that I love about what Colleen Oakes has done in the series, is she has taken the things we know and included them, but in a fresh way, in an unexpected way, in a way that you're just like, oh, well, yeah, I saw that coming, it had to happen. So, obviously, if you read the original book, if you've seen the movie, you know the pirates send a bomb into Peter's hideout, and then Tink comes and she saves him from the bomb. So that's the instance in which this happens. But what makes it so great, but also so awful, is this is when Oxley dies. And you've really formed a bond with Oxley, because not only is he a spy for Hook, but despite Peter saying he is their father, all the kids' father, he's the one that looks out for them, he has been the one who charmed them and gotten them to look up to him. Oxley is truly their parent figure. As I mentioned in my last review regarding C's, these boys do grow up. It's something I wish Oakes would talk about more or have expanded on more, but it seems that Peter stays young because Tink gave him that ability. But everybody else on the island, be it pirate or not, they age normally. And so these boys, Peter, who I'm guessing he brings them in pretty young, like 5 or 6, maybe older depending on situation. But so they've grown up idolizing Peter, but he does not care about them because he is evil. He is consumed by the evil entity that is the Shadow, which compounded with the fact that he came into Neverland as a selfish, manipulative person. Like, he was never the father figure that everybody believed him to be. So now Oxley, who we've all come to know and love, has died. And you're just like, no, you just don't. There's some people, it's like in Harry Potter, you don't want Sirius to die, you don't want Dumbledore to die, you don't want Dobby to die, but they have to die. Sometimes characters just have to die. So he has died, and the blame is put on Hook, which now the reader is saying, why would Hook do that? Because by angering Peter, it means there's a chance he'll call forth the Shadow, which we don't want to happen yet because we're not ready to combat the Shadow. So there's a question, there's a tragedy, and now Wendy is like trying to soothe Peter to prolong things. And she eventually is able to grab the pipes, and then after this bomb attack, they are defended by Tinkerbell. So when she goes to tend to Tink's wounds, she's able to get a vital piece of information, which is that Tink does not know the song, but she's also not the only fairy left on the island. The king, the fairy king, who we'd all thought was dead, is still around. So now, Wendy has to go find him. So she frees Booth, she basically kidnaps John and she takes him to the jungle. And they find the Fairy King, but he is too afraid. So he reveals to her that she can find the song on fairy gold. So now we have another mission, which is what's so great about this one. I mean, none of the books in this series have really been slow, but this one, just the pace keeps on building, and I think that's what made it so easy to tear through it, was because you just kept wanting to know, is she going to succeed? What's the next problem she's going to encounter? How is she going to solve it? And so after she gets this information, she is finally tracked down by Peter, who captures herself and Booth. She has pushed John off of a cliff into a waterfall with hopes that he will track down Hook and convey the information that they know how to find the song, and John has the pipes. Now she and Booth are captured by Peter, and what happens after that? Hold on a minute. Okay, so Wendy and Booth have been captured by Peter, and he has turned them over to Captain Mason, who I didn't mention him by name, but in Seas, he is the one who wanted to take over as captain of the fleet of pirate ships from Hook, and so he has sent them to be on his ship, and of course he's not as benevolent as Hook, because he's, I guess you could say, a true pirate. Like, he's evil. So they're on his ship, and they added another element in which he has been stealing children from Port Duet in order to row his ship and make his ship faster. So now it's like, well, it's not just Wendy and Booth who have to save themselves. They now have to save these children. They end up getting saved by Hook, and that's when the ultimate battle begins. They have the song, they have pipes, and they know Peter is going to attack. But Wendy, she has sort of always fought for the Lost Boys because she knows they're just boys, and they've been manipulated by Peter, and they don't know what they're doing. They are fighting his war without truly understanding the consequences. So she has convinced Hook not to kill the boys. Like, go for Peter, not the boys, which makes it harder. Again, that's another stake. Kind of winning, kind of losing, and right when they seem to be winning, Peter comes and takes Wendy off the boat, takes her to the beach, and he calls forth the shadow. And he's like, all right, now you need to go destroy the ship and everything on it. And because my lost boys could not do what I wanted them to do, I'm going to take away their power of flight, which means anybody in the air is going to die. But John comes flying in, and he's able to save most. So they're on the beach, and the shadow is out, and Peter has stripped Wendy of not only, because she had written down the song, he'd stripped her of that and the pipes. So she's like, well, what do I do now? And then she, who has been taking piano, I don't know how long, she is able to write them out again and call forth the shadow, I guess, out of Peter, not necessarily to her, but out of Peter. And that causes problems of its own, because now there's nobody controlling the shadow, so he, or it, is wreaking havoc. It has found the hiding spot of the Indians, and it has defeated the Mermaid Queen. It seems like all is lost until Wendy remembers a fairy enchanted knife that she had found in the very first book. She never became a swordsman, never became someone who could physically defend herself, which is really great, because I feel like there's this idea that a strong female character needs to be physically capable of defending herself, needs to be great with a sword or bow and arrow or something, when, there's an inner strength, there's a mental strength that can help a female character defeat whatever is in her way. But she has this knife, this little dagger, and she stabbed the shadow's heart. It starts coming apart, and she feels like it's going to rip her to pieces until Peter shields her from it. So the shadow then disappears, and it reopens the crack, because Peter has this ability, I guess because of the gifts Tink gave him, has this ability, or maybe because of the shadow, has this ability to come and go from Neverland as he pleases, but that rift only opens every 30 years. So it's kind of like, if Wendy and her brothers want to get out of there, then they gotta go. So Peter, I don't want to say he's good, but he no longer is possessed by the shadow. And Hook, though, wants to kill him, because that was kind of part of the deal, is Hook gets to kill Peter. But Wendy and Lomasi are like, no, we've had enough bloodshed. Let's see if we can basically rehabilitate him, let him learn from his crimes, and be punished for his crimes, but not by death. And then comes another twist, where we think all is okay, and then Peter's remaining general, Abbott, comes out of the crowd and stabs Peter in the heart. This is something that I feel like was a missed opportunity, or just was not covered enough. And that's something that I have mentioned at least in my last review of C's, is that Colleen Oakes leaves a lot of questions. She raises a lot of great questions, but then she kind of leaves a lot of questions. So we know why the Lost Boy's on the island. We know that Peter is not a good guy, and that he doesn't love these boys. But you don't really know necessarily why all of them are there. But we do know that Abbott has, on his own, come to the conclusion that Peter's not a good dude. So on that note, I know why he would kill Peter. But I think it takes a whole lot more than just knowing Peter's a bad guy to kill him. Throughout the series, you get the impression, that he has a deep-seated hatred for Peter. But we don't know enough about Abbott to know why he would hate him that much. We don't know how long he's been on the island. We don't know if the story we were told about how he ended up on the island is true or not. So I really wish that Oakes had explained his motivation a little bit more. I feel like just saying that he hates Peter, it's not enough. Anyways, so he comes and he stabs Peter. Peter is dying, and he asks for Wendy, and then they fly up to the sky, because that's where Peter wants to go. He bestows upon her the gifts that Tink gave him, and then he dies. And she, sets him off to sea. We get a little bit more resolution with Tink, because Peter, it was a very abusive relationship, physically and emotionally. But she loved him until the very end. She protected him until the very end. And up to the very end, he chose other people above her. He did not recognize her devotion to him. She is upset with Wendy, but we see the king, who had earlier in the novel, when Wendy found him, had kind of near the point of death. Old, skin and bones, he's just on the edge of life and death, but he has now been restored to his youth. And he comes and he gets Tink, and he basically promises her a new and better life or future with him if she wants it. And Wendy obviously is thinking she'll get over Peter eventually. It's not gonna take long. Now it's time for Wendy and the boys to leave. And of course, I'm also thinking, can't you take other boys with you? I don't know the passage of time. It seems like Peter has been on Neverland about 100 years. So I don't know how many of these boys have been with him, because if they're aging, I don't think they've been there that long, because they're still under the age of 16. So I don't really know if she could take them with her, because I don't know what times they came from, what years. Not important. But so it's time to leave, and she reveals that she's staying. Without Peter, these boys need a caretaker. They need someone who really loves them, someone to take care of them. So she and Booth stay in Neverland, and the boys unhappily go back to London without her. And then the epilogue, is 30 years later. We find out that John is J.M. Barrie, and he and Michael are gathered in the nursery to welcome Wendy back. And I'm telling you, I teared up. I teared up twice because I read the end. I knew the end, but I read it anyways. And then I reread it when I finished the book. And, both times it's just this idea that they've missed their sister and they get to see her at last. I did have a question because with the gifts that Tink gave Peter, the ability to age or not to age seems to be something they can use or not use. And, he says that to Wendy when he gives her this gift. So they don't show Wendy. The last word, it's like the window's open and the last word is Wendy. So I'm like, did she age? Because I'm assuming Booth does not have that gift. So, there were just so many questions that I was left with that I really wish Oakes had gone into a little bit more. Did it ruin the book? No. But for me, who has the ultimate curious mind, I just wanted to know. I wanted to know more about how her Neverland works in terms of what we think it should, with aging and with being an adult. Like, if she doesn't bring more kids to Neverland, will she eventually come back to London, to our world? Or will she just live in Neverland forever with Booth and their children, or whatever happens? Yeah, I just had a lot of questions that weren't answered, but that's more of a personal preference. Actually, I would love to know if you have the same questions. If you end up reading this series, what kind of questions do you have? There was just so much more that she could have explored, in my opinion, that she didn't. But it was an emotional book. It moved really well, really fast. There was a lot of action and adventure, and I'm satisfied. I think a lot of people had an issue with the fact that Wendy stayed behind and or that Peter died. I was cool with that, because I haven't read Divergent, but a lot of people are unhappy with the fact that, what is her name, Triss? I don't even know their names. That the main character, the protagonist, dies in the very end. I like that, because happily ever after can't happen every single time. And so I like that she sacrificed herself, that she saw a need in these boys, and that she was willing to stay behind, especially because her character growth, Peter, there is no growth in him, which is also, it's fine, because he's the antagonist. And I guess if he'd lived without the shadow and with his rehabilitation, I guess that could have intimated character growth. But some characters don't need growth. Like Voldemort, there was no growth in him. Like, he had a vendetta, and that was his main purpose. Peter had one purpose, and he sought to fulfill it. Wendy starts out this prim and proper English girl who has, I guess, a moral dilemma, where she's fallen in love with somebody beneath her station. So, what is she supposed to do? Is she supposed to turn her back on her family? Or is she supposed to stand up for herself and for him? And so, throughout the course of the series, she's just growing and realizing that the way she grew up was suppressing who she was. So in the end, she sacrifices the family she has so yearned to be back with in order to provide a family for these other kids. It was beautiful, and it made me cry, and so what? I'm a girl. I'm gonna own up to it. Let's see, what else about this book? There are so many characters that died even with John and Michael, they didn't die, but they didn't get to stay with Wendy. So we lost them in knowing that she didn't go with them. But I like that we lost so many characters that we were close to. Because, as I said, we can't keep them all. Like, there's got to be a price. And that's also a hallmark of good writing, in that we don't want to lose people. Even the pirates, like Smee. Well, he's not a good dude, but in the end, you want to cry because you lost him. Like, he should have died. Or even the kid that killed him. You're just like, why did he have to be the one to kill Smee? I got emotionally invested in this series, and I think that's one of the reasons it was so hard to let go, because I couldn't go with them when it was over. Obviously, this is one I couldn't put down. I went through it really quick, and I'm probably saying things over and over, and you're like, well, let's move on. But I think that's it. I know I really kind of skimmed over a lot of the plot points, but I still ruined it for you. I still gave you a spoiler, so be happy, or don't be happy. Turn it off and pretend like it never happened. I am definitely going to read Colleen Oakes' next, or other series. This was actually the second series, Queen of Hearts. I want to see if I am as emotionally invested in that one as I am in this one. If there's anything negative I could say about this book, it is that any formatting or technical issues that I had seen in the other two were compounded in this one. This astounds me that anybody can have spelling errors or like paragraph problems, but this one suffered from that. It didn't get in the way of the story, but I expect more from a best-selling author. Either because they should have caught it, or they should have hired an editor who should have caught it. Check it out, get back to me, and let's drink some water together in our sparkly Yeti cups.